Welcome to Inspired Living with Marc Lainhart, the Intuitive Prospector. Every Wednesday, Marc, along with his special guests, will explore thought-provoking topics and ideas that promote creativity, self-help, healing, happiness, and well-being to inspire you on your spiritual journey. Each week, Marc will discuss different paths to achieving a more spiritual, balanced, happy, and healthy lifestyle. Topics will elevate consciousness and range from metaphysics to the human and social experience and all things spiritual. Welcome to an inspired community that offers support, encouragement, and new ways of thinking. Marc is a tested, certified, and professional spiritual medium, metaphysical teacher, healer, and spiritual advisor with a spiritual practice based in Seattle, Washington. You are the inspired and the inspiration.
Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, wherever you may be in this magical, magnanimous, magnificent, majestic, marvelous, metaphysical, miraculous, mind-awakening, mind-boggling, and mind-blowing planet of ours. This is another episode of Inspired Living Radio, where we like to say you are the inspired and the inspiration. So let's be inspired, let's inspire others, and inspire before we expire. Today we're going to be talking with a special guest, first time on the show, Mr. Jeff Morris, and his new book called Just Live, Simply Take the Next Breath. And today's episode is a very important episode, near and dear to my heart, as we explore mental health, mental illness, suicide prevention, and we're going to have a long conversation about some of the tools that we can work through and some of the resources that we have right at our fingertips. And I just want to for our inspired listeners out there around the globe, thank you for listening. But I want you to know that there are lifelines. If you're struggling, a loved one, a friend, or yourself, there is a crisis line that you can call now that is a national crisis line. That number is 988. If you need to talk, the 988 lifeline is now available to those that are suffering with depression, crisis, suicide, life's challenges, and it is available 24/7, 365 days out of the year. I'll also later in the show be giving a resource for our veterans out there as well. But I just want to say thank you for joining us for this very special episode talking about mental health and suicide prevention. And we're going to talk more about Jeff's book, a very fun, intriguing, interesting, simple read. And again, it's called Just Live, Simply Take the Next Breath. I am your host, Marc Lainhart, the Intuitive Prospector, here with you yet again for another soul adventure, an inspiring episode to explore, discuss, and discover the many diamonds within each and every one of us and the many gems in our world that have yet to be revealed. So let's get comfortable. Grab your favorite drink, coffee, tea, protein shake, whatever that may be. Kick back, sit back, or lie back. Take in a nice, deep, healing, cleansing, and peaceful breath. And let us prospect and learn together as we discuss today's topic, which is, again, all about mental health, suicide prevention, identifying the triggers, the signs that can impact anybody, and the journey of the many pathways of life to help us dream, discover, explore, and experience what I like to say through the body, the mind, and the spirit for another inspiring, uplifting, and educational episode. I do want to also give a big shout out and always say thank you to our inspired listeners from around the globe, the universe, and yes, beyond. My team and I here at Inspired Living Radio are always so very humbled, grateful to you for listening, downloading, subscribing, leaving reviews, and now voting to make Inspired Living Radio and Podcast a best inspirational show and best spiritual show to follow and listen to as referenced and sourced by FeedSpot. We really appreciate it, and we really appreciate you. You make this show work, and we love our inspired listening community. If you've not yet subscribed, liked, or followed the show, there's always time to do so over on our main social media platforms. The main one is Facebook. Just look for the Inspired Living Radio and Podcast community page. You can also follow us on Instagram and X, formerly known as Twitter. Just look for the handle Inspired for us. That's the number 4. You can also follow us on our YouTube channel, Inspired Living Radio, and we are now also streaming through Audible, or you can listen to the podcast on any platforms where you listen to podcasts. Or if you have an Alexa, you can say, Alexa, open up Inspired Living Podcast, and it will play this episode. So as I like to say, as we get ready to go prospecting and learn more about amazing people around our planet that are bringing inspirational, encouraging, motivational content to the airwaves and ripple effects that take us beyond ourselves. I always like to say a new day, a new opportunity, a day we've not seen before to use our intuition to prospect this world, wonderful world around us. Let's do some prospecting. So today on the show, we're inviting for the first time, his name is Jeff Morris, and he wrote a book called Just Live and Simply Take That Next Breath. Very simple title, something I think a lot of us forget to do. And I just want to read a little bit about Jeff and his journey to write this book and be on today's episode. So he is a retired educator who has dedicated 20 years as a math teacher and a high school principal. For the past 13 years, he has shifted his focus to teaching suicide prevention to students across the Midwest in grades 6 through 12. Jeff lives in St. Louis with his beloved dog Griff and is the proud father of 2 children, Chloe and Quinn. He enjoys reading, writing, working out, watching movies, following sports, and quoting Seinfeld in his spare time. Through his work and personal life, he continues to inspire and support others in their journey toward mental wellness. Jeff Morris is a mental health advocate. He released his new book called Just Live. It's a heartfelt and practical guide aimed at helping individuals struggling with severe depression and suicide ideations. Drawing from his own experiences and extensive career in education, Jeff's book offers valuable insights and resources for anyone affected by mental illness. Jeff's struggle with depression started in middle school, leading to his first suicide attempt at the age of 30. And then between the years 2002 and 2010, he made 5 more attempts, resulting in numerous days in psychiatric wards and a stomach pumping due to a sleeping pill overdose. Jeff's unique background as both an educator and suicide attempt survivor allows him to connect with readers on a deeply personal level. And we're so excited that he is here with us today to share this story with all of our listeners. Just Live combines personal anecdotes with research from Jeff's dissertation, including insight from experts Dr. Thomas Joyner and Dr. Paul Quinnett, and more than a decade of teaching suicide prevention. The book provides readers with a comprehensive information about suicide prevention, debunking common myths, and offering practical advice for managing mental health. Despite these difficult experiences, Jeff found solace and purpose in sharing his story, which inspired him to write Just Live, Simply Take the Next Breath. Through his 45-year journey on managing mental health, Jeff has gained valuable insights that share in the hope that he can help others, including suicide is preventable. There's a significant amount of misinformation about why people attempt suicide. The most effective way to prevent suicide is for those close to the individuals to recognize the warning signs and know the steps to get them to help. And Jeff his book is available through several resources. You can also go to our social media pages where the content is now posted, but you can find the book at Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and Words Matter Publishing, or you can contact Jeff directly at Jeff Morris, jdmo67@gmail.com. And his number is 314-410-9635 if you want to get in contact and learn more. Again, that's jdmoe67@gmail.com. And I want to open up the show, Jeff, by welcoming you, but also open up with a quote that you had put in the book, and I think it's very fitting to open up the show. And it's quote, you said this: mental illness is very manageable, but it can be hard and frustrating at times. I want to help others who are going through what I've been through and educate people about the facts and myths related to suicide prevention. There is hope that anyone can live a happy life with mental illness, end quote. So Jeff, my friend, welcome to the show, and thank you for writing this book and sharing your knowledge and your experiences with my listeners today and myself.
Well, thanks for having me. I've been really looking forward to this, and I have to say that my publicist, Susie, has made me sound a lot better than what I am. She wrote up that little intro that you gave me. So, but no, I appreciate you having me here, and I love talking about this stuff and helping educate people. And my thing is, and more than anything, is that I just enjoy helping people.
Yes, and that's why we love people like yourself being on the show, because this show is also about not just inspiring people, but helping people, pointing them to, like I said at the opening, the diamond within, but also the many gems that are in our world. And mental health, as we are seeing in today's society, it is as far up as even the Olympics. Mental health has become a very what's the word I want to say, a very interesting topic of discussion, because it's not a topic that, growing up as a child of the 70s, if you said mental health back then, there was this vision of, gentlemen showing up with white coats and a paddy wagon and putting you in and taking you
Yeah.
away. And today we've come so much farther. Part of that's, education, being transparent and awareness, which is the greatest agent for change, is to being able to talk about mental health and, what drives mental health, to where even our athletes today at the highest levels are talking about their struggles. But with this book that you wrote, what I loved when I started reading this book, I was on a vacation. Actually, I took it with me for my vacation read, and I love that you opened the book with your parents talking about their perspective as far as your introduction. And tell us a little bit about that, the forwards in the book, because it's not every day that you have your parents write your forwards for your book.
So when I was thinking about, having somebody write the forward, I had a couple ideas, and for some reason it just made sense to have my mom and dad write the forward, because they've been, with me throughout this journey that I've been on, and they've been with me even when they didn't even know, and I didn't even know what I was going through as a kid. I was not diagnosed with a mental illness until I was about 33. So I spent probably 2 decades struggling with depression, and growing up from the time I was probably in middle school as a teenager up to the time I left home and went away to college, and then got married and got a job and so forth. My parents were divorced, but I still spent a lot of time with my dad too, and so they saw what I went through as a kid, and we all just thought I was moody, and but
Right, right.
looking back, I think. And so it just made sense to have them, even now they're part of I have a really good support group, my parents, my kids, some other close friends. And so I'm very open about what I go through, and I lean on them. We communicate with each other almost daily via text, and I talk to my mom and dad. And I'm very lucky, even at my age of 57, to have both my parents still alive, and they were very young when they had me, which is beneficial now. And so it just made sense to have them, write the forward. And you're not the first person that's commented on that, but I was, thrilled to have them do it, and I thought they did a great job.
Yeah, I agree. And it's not every day. Like I said, I read a lot of books, have a lot of guests over 8 seasons of doing this. I was really pleased to see both parents talking about their journey, and some, as well as their perspective of not seeing some of the signs, some of the triggers, just thinking that you're, maybe a little bit more introverted or a little bit more shy and not really
Right.
wanting to participate. And I think that's going to lead me to my first question about diagnosis. Because we know, and from your experience and your expertise, about an early diagnosis, because that can help. You said you didn't get diagnosed, and I think part of that's based on society too. We've really have grown and moved out of our ignorance and into our education on this topic and this subject, to where some people are really late in life getting diagnosis. What's your perspective and experience with early diagnosis to help uh, treat and help bring awareness to mental health for those that are listening to today's show?
Well, I think uh, that's really a big part of why I wrote this book. Was my idea was to be able to help. The initial impetus for this book was I was thinking it could be a resource that could be given by, because of my background in education. I was thinking, like, school counselors, especially in rural areas like where I grew up, don't have a lot of resources, and I thought this might be a resource that they might be able to give to parents, or even high school students. I think they're old enough, mature enough to read something like this, and use it as a way to help either themselves or somebody they care about get the help they need. And I think that even for myself, I think if I would have been diagnosed at a younger age, that I would have reached where I'm at now in managing my mental health in a much healthier and just in an overall better way. I would have done that, much sooner in life. I don't have any regrets about that. I don't look back and, spend a lot of
Sure,
time thinking I wish, because it's a waste of time to do that.
sure, exactly.
But but I think that early diagnosis, I think one of the misconceptions about mental illness and mental health overall in the U.S. is that, our mental health system is just completely broken. I don't necessarily agree with that. Now, that's not to say it doesn't have some, it's not perfect and it can use some improvement, but I think that overall our system does a decent job of helping people who get into it and then do what their doctors, their counselor, their psychiatrist, whoever they're working with, ask them to do. And they communicate, because I think that's a key point of mental illness more than other illnesses, is communicating with your doctor. And if you're on medication, if you're having side effects or it's not working, making sure to let your doctor know, because I think too many people just give up too quickly. And but back to your original question, I think early diagnosis, I think that is improving. I think it improves the quality of life for people, because once they get that diagnosis, they can learn how to manage their mental health and work with a doctor in a much more effective way.
Yeah, and I totally agree with what you just said, for the fact that the mental health system, because we've really only been having a serious conversation, from my experience, maybe in the last 20 years, where it's been more transparent, more out in the public, actually talking about, because it was a faux pas. It wasn't something, just even 20, maybe even 10 years ago, you didn't talk about it openly, where we're seeing that. And so the system has to be able to catch up to that, right? When we're having more resources, the overall, healthcare system, even how police respond to certain situations, may not necessarily need a police officer, but maybe a social worker or a mental health counselor to deal. I as a former retired, firefighter, EMT, first responder, that there were calls that we had really no business or expertise being on, because it was more of a mental health, psychological issue that, where we're starting to see, at least here in Seattle, I'm not sure in other parts of the country, but we now have teams that are being dispatched with first responders, both police and fire, that are social workers and psychologists and mental health counselors, based on how the call comes in. So the system is improving. I don't think it's broken either. I think there's a lot of resources, and you don't build Rome in a day. But we have to be also honest that we didn't have these truthful, conversations of transparency and awareness, not more than a decade ago. So, things do have to catch up. And, you said in your book, you said, quote, educators need resources for parents and students who are depressed. And I hope that counselors, administrators, and other school personnel can use my book as a resource to help them support their communities. And that's also why we're doing this show today, is to bring awareness to the topics of, mental health, depression, anxiety, suicide, awareness, because it is very prevalent in today's society. And that's just not in the education system. I pulled up just to see where we're at with our veterans, on how many veterans a day commit suicide. And as of currently right now, on average, it's 17.5 veterans every single day take their lives. And that's way too many. Now, it's down from what it used to be, but 17.5 on average is still way too many across the nation. So throughout this show, we'll be offering resources, and feel free, Jeff, if you have resources that you want to throw out there as well, but in conjunction with your book, again, Just Live,
Sure.
Simply Take the Next Breath, because in the book, there's also, which I appreciated when I was reading, I did some of the exercises, about the activities that you enjoy doing to help relieve stress, anxiety, and depression. You had a section that was talking about worrying, and I even marked it, because it says, this quote by Glenn Turner, quote, "Worrying is like sitting in a rocking chair. It gives you something to do, but gets you nowhere," end quote. And so There's some really good topics and gems in here. And so let's talk about the book, and really what you want to share on today's episode about mental health and suicide prevention, because you took those steps. You did it several times, and I'm glad that you were not successful, because you're here today to share this story. And do you think, Jeff, it would have been less than 5 if you would have been early diagnosed, you think? Not going back in the past, but just based on that analysis of early diagnosis.
I thought about that a lot. I absolutely look back on when I was younger. And I think, granted, I was a high school kid. I graduated from high school in 1985, so I really didn't even know what depression was. That was, you would hear things. It was very common. I don't want to sound sexist, but I think it was more common for someone to talk about a female having dark days, and you didn't hear much about men dealing with depression, and they did. They did, but it was, it wasn't manly to talk about being depressed, and you just suck it up and go forward. And I think that there was a lot of men who were self-medicating with alcohol and those types of things. But I think definitely if I would have grown up, if I would have grown up in the way things are today, that things would have been a little bit different. But I also look at, I look at what I've been through, and I take it as a positive, because I think that I hope I can make a positive impact with people, because somebody needed to write the book that I've written. Not that it's the greatest book ever, but I think that it's something that I hope is helpful to people. And so I wouldn't change anything with my life and the way things have turned out for me.
Well, again, for the listeners out there, it's a very easy read. It's I have to look at how many pages. It's not a big read. 92 pages. Yeah. And
Yep.
Sometimes that's all it's needed, right? Sometimes less is more. You don't need this big dictionary. You get lost in in definitions and labels and content. And I sometimes appreciate. I always say things are born twice: first in our mind, and then what we do to bring out into other people's realities. And what you're doing, Jeff, is you're bringing those difficult, dark days of what you experienced before you were diagnosed, of sharing that story, because I guarantee you somebody listening right now or in the future is going to resonate with today's episode and the book if they go and purchase it and have it on their library shelf, if you will, for a reference guide. So it is simple, and I think sometimes less is more. And I really enjoyed it while I was on vacation, relaxing in a meditation garden. I was reading this and was like, this is brilliant. This is perfect synchronicity, or synergy, as I like to say. So just like I said, for our listening audience out there, the national lifeline is out now. That's been around for a couple years. It's 988. And if you need to talk, the 988 lifeline is here. It's a suicide and crisis lifeline. And you have caring counselors 24/7, 365. And if you're a veteran listening to, you can call the same. You can dial 988 and then press 1, and that will actually get you with the veteran crisis line. You can also do a chat. There's a chat online at veterancrisisline.net/chat, or you can text 838-255. Again, these are all available 24/7, 365, and I hope that you can use these resources. Do you have any other resources that you're aware of that you'd like to throw out there for today's show?
You've mentioned the biggies. I have one.
Yeah.
I always talk about one locally here in St. Louis that I think is a really cool resource.
Yes, please.
So there's actually the group that I got my start in teaching suicide prevention. It's called Kids Under 21. And they're actually the only suicide prevention hotline that is manned completely by high school students. The students are trained on how to talk to people who are struggling.
Okay.
And so the kids, there's some programs in Missouri that require kids to do volunteer work. And so a lot of the kids in the St. Louis area who are looking to volunteer will work with Kids Under 21, KUTO. And so it's just it's a local organization, but I think it's really, really a neat thing that they do. It's a great thing about the internet is if somebody needs help, you can always just Google suicide hotline and pop it right up. But I was so happy that they added the 988 line so people didn't have to remember the old number. And I also think that another one that people can't remember that. I wanted to mention this when you talked about the police. I tell people all the time that, and it's part of the training, that if you're with somebody who's suicidal, dial 911. The police, I think, in almost every state are trained to deal with suicidal people, and
correct. Yep.
And if they have evidence, this actually happened to me, that if they have evidence that someone is suicidal, if they have text messages or voicemails, and they know that the person is suicidal, they're gonna take them into custody and require them to go to the hospital. And they're going to keep them. They're not going to be arrested per se, but they are going to be forced to go in for at least, usually I think it's 72 hours. So it's not something that people enjoy, but it could save somebody's life. And so, I tell people, if you have to do it, use that as an option.
Yeah, great resource. Yeah, a welfare check is usually how it gets toned out, and yeah, and for our listeners out there too, great, something that we didn't think about. You can check your local areas wherever you live in the world or here in the United States. Check your local resources. We have social media, we have the technology, we have the communications and the transparency to get those resources. But in the end, if you need help, call 911 and they will be able, the dispatchers are very well professionally trained to get you to the right resources. So we're going to go to our first and only break of this show, and when we come back, we're going to pick up this conversation today with our special guest, Jeff Morris, talking about his book, Just Live, Simply Take the Next Breath. We'll return here in just a few minutes. This is Inspired Living Radio.
The future of internet radio is here. Ohm Times Radio, IOM FM. Host your show on IOM FM, the radio network of Ohm Times Media, one of the more recognized brand names in the conscious community, and is backed by the extensive marketing reach of Ohm Times. Hosting a show on IOM FM immediately connects you with our extensive dedicated community.
My name is Victor Furman. Some call me The Voice. I've always been fascinated with human nature, spirituality, science, and the crossroads at which they meet. Join me Wednesdays at 8 p.m. Eastern on Ohm Times Radio, and we'll explore these topics and so much more on Destination Unlimited.
One planet, 7.3 billion people, only one you. Life offers us many opportunities and learning experiences. Are you ready to explore and discover this beautiful planet, the life and energy all around us, the spiritual world, and what is unseen, along with your own personal soul adventure? Marc Lainhart, the Intuitive Prospector, is the spiritual connection you have been prospecting for. Internationally known as a tested and professional clairvoyant medium and spiritual advisor, Marc's work as a metaphysical teacher, medical instructor, radio show host, inspirational writer, and hiking guide are here to help you on a journey of self-discovery, healing, inspiration, education, and a whole lot of spiritual awesomeness. Dare to dream. Dare to explore. Dare to live. For more information on Marc's spiritual practice in Seattle, Washington, please visit marclainhart.com or internet search The Intuitive Prospector.
Ascending Hearts is no ordinary dating site, but a spiritual dating site with a purpose, to link you with your soulmate. We engineer the serendipity so you can trust that you will attune with someone that has the same matching vibration as you. Ascending Hearts, the conscious dating site for the spiritually aware. Try Ascending Hearts for free. AscendingHearts.com.
You came across someone struggling with hunger. How would you recognize them? Would you notice an 8-year-old girl who's not excited for
summer break because she may not be having lunch again until September?
Or a war veteran who's having a hard time landing a job
and getting back on his feet?
I am the 1 in 8 Americans who struggle with hunger. I am hunger in America.
Hunger can be hard to recognize. Learn why at IamHungerInAmerica.org. Brought to you by Feeding America and the Ad Council.
Welcome back to Inspired Living. Today's special guest is Jeff Morris with his book, Just Live, Simply Take the Next Breath. He's a retired educator who has dedicated 20 years of his life, both as a math teacher and as a high school principal, and has written this book, Just Live, Simply Take the Next Breath, to share his insights and his unique background as both an educator and as a suicide attempt survivor, which allows him to connect with his readers and his interviews on a very deeply personal level. And Jeff, I threw out your contact information, but is there a website that you want to also, besides Amazon, Barnes and Noble, and Words Matter Publishing, that people might be able to pick up the book?
They can also contact me through my website. It's jeffmorris.net.
Okay. Yep. So I didn't see that here in the write-up. So yes, jeffmorris.net if you want to reach out to Jeff, and another way to get this book. As we pick this second part of the show up, one of the things that I wanted to talk about is some signs. The warning signs, some of the, you talk about in the book, some of the misconceptions. And you put this quote in here, which I think was very fitting, from Les Brown, that says this, quote, "Nothing exalts the soul or gives it a sheer sense of buoyancy and victory so each of us owes someone. We all benefit by reaching out and helping others," end quote. And that was from Les Brown. And I thought that was very fitting for that chapter about the warning signs, because what would you tell somebody that doesn't know the warning signs of somebody, whether it's a family member, a friend, or yourself? You may not know the warning signs that you're in crisis. What would you say to help our listeners out for today?
Well, I think that that's a really good question, because I think my experience is that vast majority of people can tell when someone they care about is struggling. They may not be able to pinpoint why they feel that way, but they can just tell something's off, that the person they care about is, feeling bad, feeling sad, feeling depressed. And so I find that most people, it typically happens with people you know really well, because you know their normal mannerisms and how they act. And I think that most people find that they can tell when somebody's struggling. But the most common thing is that when people are suicidal or people are really depressed, they start doing things that they don't normally do, like isolating themselves, giving stuff away. And their personality changes. They're just not as outgoing. But I think, like I said, I think most people can tell when something is off with somebody that they care about.
Yeah, and from personal experience, both family and friends that have been successful in committing suicide, you kind of think back and go, could I have recognized the signs? Could I have recognized the triggers? And I know from my experience as a retired first responder and being a veteran myself, one of the things that we were trained to do, and for the listeners out there, it's called the SAVE training, SAVE, and the S stands for know the signs. The A stands for ask the most important question of all, and that is, quote, "Are you thinking about killing yourself?" End quote. The V stands for validate the person's experience. And E stands for encourage treatment and expediting getting help. And that's, again, the SAVE training that I had gone through. But some of the other things, to look for, a good one is, you said, giving a lot of stuff away. People that have committed suicide, a lot of times I hear, and I don't know if you can relate to this, Jeff, but they just wanted the pain to stop. There was just so much pain, and they didn't think about the outcome, the consequences. There was just so much pain. They wanted the pain to stop. Would you agree with that, or offer a different perspective?
Actually, I agree 100%. I can even expand on it a little bit, because one of the questions
Yes,
that
please.
I get asked is, and I think I talk about this in the book, is why do people die from suicide? Suicide goes against every, I think, natural instinct that we as human beings have. I mean, I know for myself, I go to my doctor when I have a health issue. I ask for medication. I take medication for my depression and for my mental health, because I want to live. We go for pre-screenings for cancer and get physicals and do all kinds of things to extend our life as long as we can, because we want to live a long time. And then suicide goes 180 degrees against that. And we can find reasons why someone gets down and gets depressed, like going through a divorce, being diagnosed with a terminal illness, moving to a new town, losing your job. There's all kinds of reasons. But most of the time, lots of people go through those things and never even consider suicide. The number one, the main reason, the real reason people die from suicide or attempt is because of what you just said. And that is they're just in so much pain, they don't know what else to do. And so suicide is really about one thing, and that's about ending pain.
Yeah. And that's why we're doing today's episode, to give you these resources and those support networks that are out there. Like we said, 988 Lifeline. There's mentalhealth.va.gov. There is veteran crisis lines for our veterans out there. There's keepitsecure.net. There is your local, reach out to your city, wherever you find your local city services. I guarantee you that they will actually have resources available for any kind of counseling, and including training. I know that Seattle has a training where you can actually learn to how to deal with somebody that's in crisis, whether it's yourself, a family member, a friend. And learn some of these training techniques to help people with. And again, that's just what we talked about earlier in the show. It's just the network and the system is improving. I don't think it's broken either. I just think that it needs tweaking, and it needs understanding, and it needs time. Again, you don't build Rome in a day. And we are just frankly having these open, transparent conversations within just this last decade. The one person that really jumped out to me, that really kind of put this on the map for me from a professional standpoint, was Michael Phelps, the greatest swimmer to ever jump in the pool and swim a lap. He came out publicly years ago and really started talking about his, he had such a huge platform as one of the greatest swimmers of all time as an Olympian, and that reached a lot of people. And I remember that being like, wow, he's really bold for coming out, and because you worry about the risk of losing your endorsements or what might, people are always going to have something to say, right? But I really remember Michael Phelps stepping out on his big platform to really talk about mental health and suicide prevention. Did you have somebody that really resonated with you, that kind of helped you during your days of struggle and getting through those dark days, that really inspired you?
When I had my first suicide attempt, where my family, it was actually my second attempt, where my family knew what I was going through and I was hospitalized. I really didn't have anybody that was at that point someone that I looked to and thought, if they can come out and deal with this, I can. But I was just, now that you mentioned that, I was just thinking about recently someone who I think has really been a positive impact for mental health awareness is a congressman from Pennsylvania, John Fetterman, and right after he was elected, right after he was elected, he went into the hospital for a couple of weeks. And when that happened, I was like, although I felt bad for the guy having to go through it, I thought that is such a great thing to happen for someone like him, to be open and honest about what he's going through, because the last people in the world who admit that they have a mental illness would be someone in a political environment. And so for him to do that, I thought that was amazing. And I think that the other end of the spectrum is where you're at in Seattle. You all have seen so many, lost so many famous musicians, Chris Cornell and Kurt Cobain. And all the Lane Staley from Alice in Chains. I was thinking, and so it's been on the opposite end of the spectrum. But I think one of the things that I remind people is that just because you're successful doesn't mean that mental illness doesn't impact them. People think that, well, just if you've got all kinds of money and fame and resources and everything you want in life, that's going to take all that pain away. And that actually is not the case at all. It can actually be the opposite. Having a lot of stuff and being depressed can make a person feel worse. So, I think anytime anybody like Michael Phelps, like John Fetterman, anytime somebody comes out and talks about, as a celebrity, dealing with mental illness is a good thing.
Yeah, I think, whether you're an Olympian swimmer, from swimmer to state senator, I do remember that because he had a severe stroke, to be able to use their platform. Simone Boyle, I can't, I'm tongue twisted today. the goat of the Olympics, she, last round was struggling with mental awareness and mental illness, and really took a break. It's using these platforms to reach out for people to be, one, the transparency. It's not a faux pas. It's not, something to be embarrassed about. And to get the resources and to get the support network up and running, because again, I guess talking to a suicide survivor, what was kind of going through your mind? What was like the mind chatter when you had done this, the first, second, or third time? What were your conversations that you had going that might offer some perspective to our listeners about what's going through the mind at a time such as what you experienced?
Right. I was just thinking of this. I had a conversation with somebody on a different podcast a couple of days ago, and it's very hard, and I think it's a good thing, because I know I was in so much pain mentally and emotionally, and even physically with the anxiety I was going through. But I can't remember what that feels like. And so, but I know it was the worst, thing that I've been through. And sometimes it would last. I can remember it lasting even, pretty much weeks, where I would go through that kind of just torture, and it would affect my sleep. I would go, sleeping an hour to two a night. I wasn't eating. I went through a period where I lost probably, I'm a pretty big guy, and I'd lose 25 to 30 pounds. And the depression diet is no fun to go through. So, it's a very isolating feeling, and I would not wish it upon my worst enemy for anybody to have to go through it.
Yeah, I've never heard it called that, the depression diet, but that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
So, yeah, not one of the diets that you want to be on. So I can definitely, my personal experience with, PTSD, anxiety, depression is definitely something I've experienced, and it can be but at the same time, having that support system in place and having people that care about you and check in on you is very important. I do want to just throw some tips out there for our listeners is, if you're experiencing somebody that's in crisis, some of the things to just think about, some of the nuggets, the diamonds to think about is, one is to remain calm, listen more than you speak, maintain eye contact, act with confidence, do not argue with the person. Use open body language is very important. Limit your questions, let them do a lot of the talking. Be supportive, hopeful comments, but also be honest with them. And there's no quick solutions, but let them know that help is always available. And you can also get right on the phone with either local 911, 988, Veteran Crisis Line, and then people of, these social workers that are trained and psychiatrists, they can really ask the right questions. So if you know somebody or you yourself are experiencing severe pain that Jeff was just talking about, that pain will pass, but don't let that pain be the end of your story. Let it be a semicolon to that sentence, but let your sentence and your story continue on. So that's something I learned in researching for this your book and this show, Jeff, is there's actually a tattoo. If you see somebody with a semicolon tattoo on their body, that means that they are a suicide survivor or they continue their story. And it's called the semicolon movement, to where it's not the end of the sentence. It's just a pause in the sentence, and the sentence continues on. So I thought that was kind of inspiring to learn as I researched for this show. So with the time we have left, Jeff, I want to turn the platform over to you now, and really anything you want to talk about in the book, something that really you think is important for our listeners. Again, if you want to get this book, you can go to our social media sites. All the links are there. You can also go to jeffmorris.net, and you can get the books where books are sold on Amazon, Barnes & Nobles, and Words Matter Publishing. But this is the time I want to give you to really highlight your book and something that's near and dear and inspiring to you.
Well, first of all, I want to tell you, you mentioned the semicolon. I have a number of tattoos, and I have multiple semicolons. So
oh my goodness! Wow!
I've been part of the semicolon movement for. Well, and it's interesting. I didn't get my first tattoo till late, but a lot of my tattoos, especially ones that people can see on my arms, have a mental health message. And I didn't,
Mm-hmm.
I just did it because it was important to me, but it actually worked out to where when people see those, especially when they see the semicolon, I also have the old suicide prevention hotline, 800-273-8255, and I have 988 on my arm. And when people see those, it usually starts a conversation. And
I was going to say, yeah.
One of the things I've learned is, suicide prevention, mental illness, mental health touches everybody. In fact, I think every person has had a situation where they've suffered a mental illness. I like to keep things simple. I think there's two kinds of mental illness, or two kinds of depression: situational and then chemical. What I have is chemical. I'm one that I'm going to have to deal with depression, on a regular basis, because it's just kind of the way I'm wired. It's kind of cyclical for me. So I like to joke that it's kind of like my own menstrual cycle, because it happens about every month, 6 weeks.
Right,
and so,
right.
I'm one that it's more chronic for me. But even someone who only has dealt with depression because of something that's happened to them. And I'll give an example. A lady, a good friend of mine, her name is Kim. She'd never dealt with any mental illness, but her son went away to college. And when he went away to college, she got really depressed and even had to go on medication. She was only on medication for about 6 months. She recovered quickly, and she hasn't had to take medication since. She still dealt with a mental illness for that period of time. So I find that mental illness touches everybody. Everybody has to deal with it at some point. Doesn't mean they're going to be, she never became suicidal, was never hospitalized, never even, but she did have to ask for some help. And so, I think that, I also think that, as we've discussed already, we're doing a much better job of talking about mental health. And one of the things that I think we've almost eradicated is the stigma attached to mental illness. I find that people still think there's a stigma. So, people think that's out there, but I have yet to find anybody in the last probably 7 or 8 years who doesn't take mental health seriously and doesn't know that it's a real thing that people have to deal with. So, as far as the book goes, I'm an educator. I get my greatest joy and I get a high from helping people. And that's, whether it's helping somebody into their car, helping someone across the street, or helping someone who is having a mental health crisis. There's no greater joy for me than being able to help somebody. And that's what I hope comes out of this book.
Brilliant. I love it. You just said that you get a high helping people, and I'm in the same category. Yeah. All the years I've been on this planet, from my days early in the Coast Guard to being a firefighter to doing this podcast now, it's always about being in service and helping others, and getting a high from helping others. So I love that. That's a great. You should tagline that for your next book: getting high to help others.
Yeah.
One of the other things, because you make some good points, whether it be in chemical or environmental, your material world. One of the things, for the listeners out there is pay attention to the weather as well, because that's something over the last decade plus, to where, being in Seattle, I was actually affected by what's called the seasonal affective disorder, which is called SAD for short. And that is a type of depression that is triggered by seasonal changes. So if you're in a place where, like Seattle, where it rains a lot, it's overcast and gloomy, that can trigger the nervous system as well. So more vitamin C, vitamin D, things that you can do when the weather changes, because we're right in that middle of, the equinox is now come and went, and we're now moving into the deep fall season. So, the hours are dark, the hours are, the days are darker, and it can really impact. So just, another thing to pay attention to is the seasonal affective disorder. And that's something I experienced. I didn't know until, I lived in Seattle, because I traveled all across the country, and we ended up in Seattle. And after a couple of years, I'm like, I just feel like, sad all the time. And I didn't know that it was actually a disorder that can be triggered based on the weather. And then, of course, you said chemical yourself because you said you were diagnosed. I think in the book you said bipolar 2, if I remember correctly reading that. And, that's important also, that getting that diagnosis to help you treat that, because one of the things that I went through with the SAD, but also low testosterone, which is a hormone. So no testosterone, no energy, sad, depression, couldn't figure it out. And that's where, we had these conversations where my naturopath said, yeah, you need testosterone and you need to be aware of the seasonal disorder that's impacting you. So great reference there as well. So just with the last few minutes that we have here, I always like to say who or what inspires you, Jeff, and anything else you'd like to point out from the book. Let's finish up the show, inspiring, encouraging, motivating others. And again, the resources we've listed and said today, please reach out to those resources because they are available. We are having open, transparent conversations of awareness when it comes to mental health and suicide awareness. And anything else you'd like to add to that, Jeff?
No, well, one thing, thing I always love about, so another thing I enjoy is learning. And you've taught me a few things today. One was the SAVE acronym that you mentioned. So I know so you're actually in the same state, since you're in Seattle. The program that I use to teach suicide prevention is called Question, Persuade, Refer. And the acronym for that is obviously QPR. And the QPR Institute is in Spokane, Washington. And it's a wonderful organization. Yeah. And if anybody is looking, so one of the other things that I tell people is that helping somebody who is suicidal is simple. Not easy, but it's simple. And the acronym QPR simply stands for question. If you think somebody's suicidal, somebody you care about suicidal, you mentioned it. The first thing you want to do is ask them the question, are you suicidal? If you don't feel comfortable asking it that bluntly, you can ask them, are you thinking about hurting yourself? Or do you wish you'd never been born? But ask it in some form. The P, persuade, means you want to, after you've asked them the question, you want to persuade them to get help, persuade them to give you time to help them get help, and let them know that, you've taught, you're pretty educated on this because you talked about the same things just in a different form, but you want to persuade them to give you time. And then the R stands for refer. And that just means you want to refer them to experts, refer them to the professionals, the doctor, counselor, take them to the hospital, call 911, call 988, give them on the hotline. And the other thing that you mentioned that I agree 1,000% with is when it comes to dealing with someone who is suicidal, the most important thing you do is not what you say to them, but that you listen. Let them talk, honor what they're saying. Don't be judgmental. Even if if somebody says they're suicidal, they are. That is not something that people typically do for attention. I've seen, in all my years in education, I've seen one instance where I thought someone was doing it for attention. And it just doesn't happen very often, where it's because some people think that. So be a good listener. And the example I give is, even if you've never been suicidal, you could think about a time where you felt bad about something, and just being able to talk about it helped you feel better. And you didn't solve the problem, you didn't really change anything, you just got it off your chest. And so when somebody's suicidal, just being able to open up about it is the first step in getting them, on the road to recovery.
Yeah, that's brilliant. I love it. You said QPR from Spokane, because I was actually born and raised in Spokane, Washington. So small world. Yeah. And I love acronyms just because they're great ways to remember when, in a time of crisis, to help people, whether it's the QPR or the SAVE. Again, know the signs, ask the most important question, validate the experience, and encourage and expedite on getting them help. Jeff, it's been a pleasure talking with you today, my friend. And I just want to thank you for sharing and being very open and transparent for today's show and sharing this wonderful book. Again, if you want to get the book, you can go to our social media sites. The links are there. You can also go to the major sites, whether it's Amazon, Barnes & Noble's, Words Matter Publishing, or jeffmorris.net. The book is called Just Live, Simply Take the Next Breath, and it's a good read, but it's also a interactive little workbook where you can actually fill out little things that inspire you, things that you want to prevent, things that you want to be aware of, and kind of a journal and book all in one. So it's been a pleasure talking with you today, my friend. Keep up the great work, keep inspiring people, or as we like to say, be inspired, inspire others, and inspire before we expire. And I just wish you much health and success in your future.
Thank you very much, Mark. I appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
I appreciate you. Until our next soul adventure together, be kind, be caring, be compassionate, and most importantly, wherever you're at in this world, dare to dream, dare to explore, dare to live, and discover the diamond within. We'll see you next time here on Inspired Living. Take care, everybody.